to the DNVR Avalanche podcast presented by DraftKings Sportsbook, the number one rated sportsbook app out there. I'm your host, Rudo, joined by AJ Hafley. And on today's show, it's been a couple days, took the weekend off. It's time to get into the hard questions, the serious questions about this Avs Vegas series and really dig into the meat and potatoes of how it all fell apart.
Rudo, what'd you do with your 3 days off?
I did nothing and then got into a car accident and then have been dealing with that. So it's been a great 3 days.
And I understand being upset about how things went, but you had to go and run into somebody.
Yeah, right. All right. To be fair, I was not at fault. Okay.
I feel like everybody says that about a car accident.
All I'm saying is a dude over 70 who's had multiple strokes maybe shouldn't have a license. That's all I'm saying. I'm okay. Anyway, not the topic of today's show, although that series does feel a little bit like a car crash for the Avalanche, to be fair.
It really, it kind of does, man. It kind of feels like they got halfway through the intersection.
Yeah,
the engine stalled out, and then they just got T-boned.
And then a semi came through.
Yeah,
and blasted them off the road, basically.
Car accidents, they rock.
Look at the series as a whole. Obviously, the Avs lost 4 games straight. That's very bad. You can pretty much discount game 1, at least for any conversation that has to do with digging into what happened in this series, because the Avs blew them out, and that was that. But the problems in this series really started in period 2 of game 2, right? The Avs would go from there for about, if you don't count the overtime, 8 straight periods of Vegas kind of just dunking on them, at least in the underlying metrics. So, I mean, obviously we're going to break this down and quantify things as best we can, but overarching, what was the biggest problem in this series, AJ?
Well, I think number one for me is just star player production.
Yep.
I would say number one on my list, the first thing that I point to, Nathan MacKinnon, games 2 through 5, 1 point.
Yep.
That right there. Even strength. That top line didn't do anything. They just have to score more. Look, you look at the opposite side. Vegas's top 6 did basically all of their scoring.
Yeah.
They got a fourth line. They got a couple of fourth line goals at the end of the series, but otherwise, it was all their best players.
Well, and I mean, you go down the list too. Yes, obviously McKinnon is the primary superstar on the team, but Landeskog had 2 points in games 2 through 6. Neither of which were goals, if you don't count game 1. So the production wasn't there either. And Makar had 3 points in games 2 through 6, a little bit better, but again, no goals in games 2 through 6. So,
well, and with Makar, we saw had the puck a lot.
Yep,
was in the offensive zone a lot throughout the series, but was not as special with the puck as we have seen in the past.
He's proven that he's capable of being.
Yeah. And that's a different kind of problem.
Definitely.
But
there's a different conversation around Makar in general there. But
yeah, but I would say your top line, especially the next thing for me is Phil Grubauer in games 4 through 6.
Yeah, like games 4 and 5, I thought he was serviceable.
Game 4, It was like he didn't have it and he wasn't great. It was just okay. But it wasn't like this is a disaster. Game 5, he really didn't play poorly. It wasn't, and you look at the three goals that they scored, and you're not like, oh my God, Groovy, what the hell? But
at the same time, if he makes one big save, the Avs win one of those games, and it's a completely different series. Yeah, I get
exactly. And then Game 6, he was just awful.
Yeah, no excuse for Game 6. He blatantly didn't have it from the first shot that went in, where he didn't track a puck up the board.
He wasn't even looking at it.
Yep.
So, how different is Game 6 if that goal doesn't get scored? And
the complete
and Grubauer is actually like playing well.
And the Avs are chilling up 1-0 in the first period. Yeah.
And like they were skating, they were playing well. They were it was good. Like so that, and then number 3 for me is secondary production.
Yeah.
It didn't.
Chad has already talked about Burakovsky in there he finally got the 1 goal in Game 6, but
that's the thing, though.
Too little, too late. Yeah.
One goal in that series.
Yep.
I wrote in my series preview that the X factors for the series were Jonathan Marchessault versus Andrei Burakovsky. Jonathan Marchessault, I think, had 5 goals.
I believe so, yeah.
Andrei Burakovsky had 1.
3 of those came in one game, to be fair, but
but then even then, you
still
remove
2
that,
other goals, yeah.
And he still got, and Burakovsky still got outscored, man.
Yeah.
And that line in general tore Colorado up.
Yeah,
Riley Smith. Burakovsky had 1 goal. I believe he finished postseason with 1 goal and 3 assists.
Yep.
So that's that. I just thought that was the lack of Nazem Kadri really exposed
the second line in general.
Tyson Jost. Look, it was all feel good when they were up 2-0 in the series, but from a process standpoint, he got absolutely crushed.
Yep.
As that series went on, crushed.
Yep.
He finished bottom on the Avs with a 34.34% Corsi for. And I'm not counting Sampo Ranta's 13 minutes.
Yeah, in the 2 games he played, yeah.
So Tyson Jost, 82 minutes at 5v5. Crushed. Absolutely put a big old spotlight on any idea that Nazem Kadri wasn't valuable or that they could win without him or whatever. They did not have an answer there.
Well, and I think the conversation goes deeper than that too, right? Because there's always players, especially in the playoffs, that have extremely poor underlying numbers but find a way to produce. And the Avs didn't really get any of that. I mean, they had an unbelievably hot playoffs from Brandon Saad.
Yeah.
But beyond that, their depth was, at least when it comes to offensive production, was pretty much non-existent. You got some production out of Donskoy at the very, very end, like Burakovsky, but that's about it.
Yeah. Well, and then you think Landy's going to take less money on his deal?
Yeah, that would be crazy.
$5.5 million. Come on now.
For a guy who's scored 20 goals, 8 times now? Or is it 7?
And he's gonna take a $200,000 pay cut.
Not likely.
Yeah. So that was bad. Like lines 2 and 3, all of those just not. I mean, it was just bad.
Yep.
They were awful, and then the really big glaring problem that they have is Sam Girard.
Yeah, he was not good at all. And look, we'll get to Patrick Nemeth, I'm sure, as well. But one of those dudes is a surefire top 4 defenseman on the Avs this year and indefinitely into the future.
Yeah, there isn't a team in the NHL where Sam Girard is not a top 4 defenseman.
Right. And the concerning part about this series is not the situations where he maybe got beat physically or struggled in that way in the defensive zone. That I think you understand to a certain extent. and you live with. But when you're watching Sam Girard turn pucks over and struggle to break pucks out effectively, that's bad. I mean, that is really problematic for the way he plays.
I mean, there was a moment in Game 6 where he danced the forechecker, gets away from him, and goes over to the right side of the ice. He's on his backhand now, and skates himself right into a problem.
Yep.
And makes a really poor attempt at backhanding the puck up and out of the zone.
I mean, he comes up one-handed on his backhand anyway.
And it's like, dude, you're just causing problems for yourself.
Yep.
And it was kind of like that all series where they would just have to pressure him. And like Sam Girard makes his money as a guy who gets out of those situations. That's specifically what you're asking him to do. Which is why his failure is way bigger than Patrick Nemeth's failures or Ryan Graves' failures, because you know what you're getting with those guys. You know that what their limitations were. In this series, what Sam Girard does well, you just didn't see a whole lot of. And at 5v5, he was on the ice for 12 of Vegas's 17 goals in the entire series.
That's a lot.
12 of 17 at 5v5 happened with Sam Girard on the ice. That's unacceptably bad.
Yeah.
So that's
no argument from me on that.
It's a huge issue. And this see what Brad is talking about with playing him with Ryan Graves kills him. Last year it was Ryan Graves is being carried by Cale Makar, and now Ryan Graves is killing Sam Girard. Ryan Graves is a serial killer at this point. This dude is.
Here's my problem with that. Unless you're playing him with Makar, Girard is going to be the go-to guy to break out the puck on whatever pairing he's on.
Yeah, and he was used when Makar was healthy, and they decided to go with Taves Makar together. They found an enormous amount of success with that pairing.
Yep.
P.S. That pairing finished the series at like 55%. Corsi.
Yep.
So they were pretty good. But Girard was used a lot all year long. He was used a lot as like the fixer with other guys.
Just put him with whoever kind of guy.
Exactly. They would regularly put him with a rotation of guys, and he would be just fine. He would elevate that pairing because he's remains a very, very good hockey player.
Yeah. Don't get us wrong. We'll continue breaking down this series on Girard, but on the whole, the Avs are still in love with the contract they've given to Sam Girard and his career going forward.
This was year 1 of 7. So
honestly, it felt reminiscent of last year with Devon Taves in the playoffs, where you saw this guy who is capable of being a high-quality top 4 defenseman, but struggled heavily in this playoff series specifically. The same way Taves did against Tampa Bay last year in the bubble.
And we saw some of those same struggles from him this year against Vegas, but
not nearly as bad. But
he fought through it.
Yeah.
And he fought through it to have some level of effectiveness.
Honestly, there's probably a decent argument that Taves was the Avs' best defenseman in that series, in the Vegas series, but we can talk about that a little bit more in just a second, as we are brought to you by Breckenridge Brewery, the official beer of DNVR. Check out the DNVR Avalanche. You always see me drinking it down at the DNVR bar, which, you can still come on down there, whether it be for Rockies games. We have some stuff planned to do down there in the offseason as well. So even if there's no Avs hockey on the televisions, it should be a fun time. Also brought to you by Green Mountain Dental Group, the best family dentist in the Denver metro area, just 15 minutes from downtown over in Lakewood. They are awesome. They will make sure they remind you of when your appointments are and remind you to schedule ones in the future as well. We've had bunches of people switch and they all say they're great. So schedule a cleaning, x-ray, and exam with them, and they'll hook you up with a free Sonicare toothbrush. Also, even if it's the off season, we still have a ton of content coming your way, whether it be these podcasts or other YouTube videos. Sure to check out our second channel as well. I'll be posting loads and loads and loads of highlights from the season over on that channel very shortly here. So check those out as well, and check out AJ's articles. I know he's working on a couple things right now, as well as we get closer to expansion draft, regular draft, and free agency, things will get all hyped up and rolling there. So, yeah. All right. Second period of the DNVR Avalanche podcast, presented by DraftKings Sportsbook. AJ, I think this is an interesting conversation because, on the one hand, yes, the Avs didn't get any top-end production, or not nearly enough, but they did. When you're watching the games, the defense always seems to be the more glaring issue, right? Because particularly the string of egregious breakdowns and turnovers that we've seen from the Avs, especially in their weaker games in this series. And look, I don't think we really need to relitigate the whole Patrick Nemeth situation or anything like that.
Are we done with Girard?
We can continue if you have more to say on Girard, because the thing with Girard is I'm not really worried about this being a long-term problem. Like, yes, this is something that will come up when the Avs are in the playoffs again next year. But as far as the regular season is concerned, I'm not worried about it.
Well, I mean, yeah, regular season,
different animals for sure.
Yeah, they've shown that they're just fine there.
Yeah,
but do we have identity concerns here? Like, what? How do you help? How do you better help Sam Girard next season?
In the playoffs, I assume you mean, just in general.
Yeah.
Or if he goes through a stretch like this, sure.
Yeah, and for the record, no, we're not engaging in any of this dumbass are they shopping Sam Girard talk. It's stupid. We're not messing.
If you're considering trading Sam Girard, take one look at his contract, laugh, and say no to all offers.
Yeah, no.
So
you're not. Look, I'll tell you what. In 2 years, if Girard's play continues to be problematic in the postseason,
conversation, absolutely.
Then maybe you start to look around. But this is anything other than that right now is stupid. It's just stupid.
I think Brad is sort of on the right track here. I don't think it's necessarily playing him with Byram, but I do think it is playing a defenseman like Byram, because if you look at the way Vegas plays hyper aggressively and Sam Girard is struggling to get pucks out, he's walking himself into trouble. If you can shift away from him a little bit more and move to someone like Byram, whose his whole thing is extremely good at getting pucks out with his feet.
Yeah.
So if Sam Girard is struggling a little bit, you need to be able to shift into a role where you can put someone else who's reliable breaking pucks out on their own. And
well, how about a different name to suggest here?
Go for it.
What about Connor Timmins?
Also an option.
Because while Timmins wasn't lights out,
he was solid for sure.
He was very quietly.
Well, the Avs were collapsing around him in games 3 and 4. He was arguably the Avs' best defenseman. So
yeah, he was very quietly in that series. He actually ended up okay. Actual shot attempts, he was negative in the series, but actual shots on goal, dead even.
Yep.
With Connor Timmins on the ice, 5v5 in that series, he was dead even. And actually led the entire Avs team
Sounds about right.
At 50%. So, we saw Timmins really start to turn it on at the end of the season against some of the bad teams, against the Sharks and the Kings. And you started to see,
there's something here.
This is where the hype is coming from.
Yep.
And then really, really solid play throughout the postseason. Like, wasn't special, was not lights out.
But there was enough. You started to see the decision making come online a little bit.
Yeah, you started to see an understanding of his understanding of his own limitations.
Yep.
Because he understands that he can't make mistakes. Like a great example of this, the mistake that Ryan Graves made at the end of Game 5 in overtime.
That one either. Yeah.
You saw Timmins make that mistake a multitude of times early in the season,
in the regular season, and now he's learned that.
That just was not a regular part of his game anymore.
Well,
would he still get a shot blocked? Yes. Guess what? That is going to happen. That is part of the gig when you shoot from the blue line.
Well,
but
I forget which game it was, but I remember pointing this out too. Near the end of the regular season, he got a shot blocked up high, and the dude was immediately zipping backwards out of the zone, saying, "There's no way I'm letting anyone pass me because of this." Yeah.
Well, there was also the thing that he decided that he was also effective, where if he got the shot blocked, he would just skate into the guy,
the dude too,
and put his shoulder into his chest and separate him from the puck. And then he was like, "Okay, I need help.
Yeah,
but I have bought 3 seconds for my teammates." And
either way, it's not just he's blocked it and he's beat. Yeah,
exactly. So it got better.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you look at what they have right now for next year's defense, for right now, you look at Cale Makar, Connor Timmins, Eric Johnson on your right side.
Yep.
And on the left side, you have a combination of Devon Taves, Sam Girard, Bowen Byram, Ryan Graves, Jacob McDonald.
Yeah.
Those are all the guys who are either still under contract or will be back.
Look, I know Jamie Alexiak is on the table, and that's sure something we'll talk about later.
Well, and we're going to get, but when we get into free agents and stuff, like there's a number of guys that you'd have like Adam Larson is a guy that you could have an interest in.
But
there will be names that we can talk about where can this guy help? Sure. We can totally get to that later. But for right now,
look at that 8D, and I don't think you're going to find many, certainly 8 deep, that are as good as what the Avalanche have. The problem in this series was that basically none of them played to the level that they're capable of. And granted, look, not having EJ probably hurts as well. Certainly a steadying force on that blue line.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is when you're running a bottom pairing of players like Patrick Nemeth and Ryan Graves, however they want to mix the pairs up, whatever. Those are the bottom 2D on the core. I guess Timmins you could throw in there too. But anyway, you know what you're going to get to a certain extent, certainly out of Patrick Nemeth, and to a lesser extent out of Ryan Graves. And yeah, I think at times Patrick Nemeth really did struggle in this series, but the expectation is that your top 4D are going to pick those guys up and do good things on the other end of the ice. And the Avs just didn't get enough of that out of their D-core in this one.
So while I agree with you, the other problem here, and this is why I think it's funny that people are demanding that they go and get size, because the two biggest dudes on their defense just got annihilated in that series.
Yep.
Annihilated.
Patrick Nemeth 6'3", 230, and Nobody was happy he was even in the lineup at the end of that series. So
finished at 34% Corsi in that series. 36% actual shots on goal. Now, did not get scored on as much as people thought.
Again, Patrick Nemeth is the victim of the, oh my God, egregious mistake. It's not the total accumulation of smaller errors. It's the hilariously bad turnover that you can't even fathom why he made that decision.
Yeah.
And people remember those goals a lot more.
Right. But during the series at 5v5 on the ice for 2 goals for and 4 goals against.
Yep.
Okay.
Sure.
So the actual pucks in the back of the net overstated. Now with Ryan Graves on the ice for 4 goals for 8 goals against.
A little bit
at 5v5.
Higher octane there for sure.
Yeah. And granted, Graves played 20 extra minutes. That's a full game's worth for a defenseman of ice time for Ryan Graves. But it also 38%.
I mean,
got devoured in that series.
Well, and you look at how these series played out.
Yeah, you want to go get a Blake or a Bork?
Just go get a Hall of Fame defenseman.
So you want one Hall of Fame defenseman in his prime and the other one right at the end of the road.
All right,
I don't think Zdeno Chara is coming out west. Otherwise, there you go, right?
That would be the option. Let me just turn the salary cap off real quick, and then the Evs can go get whoever they want.
Yeah, so this is why like we will get into the different names of guys that they can go and get
once free agency / deadline, or rather expansion draft get closer.
Yeah, we'll get into a lot of those types. Like Alec Martinez would actually be an interesting name to talk about if you think that. I think he's 33 years old.
He's a little on the old side, I think.
If you think that you're buying big on that, on it being real, then okay, But anyway, I don't want to get
for the future.
P.S. I have no interest in Zdeno Chara personally. I didn't last year. I don't this year. I was just saying a Hall of Fame type guy at the end of the year,
which I don't even know if he'll come back next year. But
I don't have any idea. But it's funny to me that Sam Girard is getting crushed for being too small, and everybody's like, "Well, you got to get bigger." Okay, well, in the NHL, the vast majority of the time, you go and get bigger, you give up skill.
Yep,
that's how it goes. Once you start to get over about 6'2", you start giving up skill by a lot.
Yep.
So you've got to try and balance it, right? And they've got a guy, we talked about him all series. He'll be a regular for the Avs next year, who's 6'1" and already 200 pounds in Bowen Byram.
Yeah.
So a little physical maturity, a little added strength, blah, 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 blah. That might honestly be all they need to do. Is just add that guy.
Straight up.
Another year for Connor Timmins.
Yep.
And then whatever at this point you have to whatever you get out of Eric Johnson, you're happy with.
Right. If he's healthy and can play, great.
Yeah.
If not, you cross that bridge when you get there.
Yeah. If you're fine giving up skill for size, you end up with Patrick Nemeth. This is exactly the point that I am making. You can't both be mad about Sam Girard and his play and say we have to get bigger guys and then
want to take Patrick Nemeth out of the
rid of Patrick Nemeth,
yep.
who is the exact archetype that is the opposite of Sam Girard.
Yep.
And if you want to find the balance, you have to pick in the top 5.
Yeah, if you want to find the balance, you're talking about Hall of Fame players.
You're talking about the best in the league, the guys who were like 6'2" and great skaters and move pucks really well. Like those are really, really, really hard guys to find.
Just go out and get a Victor Hedman. That's all you have to do.
Yeah, just go get a guy that's 6'5" and skates like the wind and does everything well.
Right, exactly.
So, but this is like why we will talk about a guy like a Jamie Alexiak, who it's funny that he's already become like the big name that we're talking about. because he still has to get to market.
Very
And like
could be signed.
that's like next week.
Yep.
Next week, that guy's going to sign like a 5-year deal and stay in Dallas. And it's like, well, this is why free agency sucks.
Well, also why we told you all to wait.
Yeah. Anyway, point being, I think defensively, you can look at the problems, but you can also say next year they don't need like major changes. Maybe adding a guy would be great.
Yeah, not even, I barely even call that tinkering, right? You're talking about adding a bottom pairing guy at most.
For the most part, you're saying, how do we improve on defense? Bowen Byron becomes a regular. Connor Timmins, second season. Sam Girard, further development. Cale Makar, further development. Yeah. You're hoping that you continue to get the best that you can out of Devon Toews. Because historically,
he's 90% of the dude he was this year.
Historically speaking, guys like Devon Toews, who are really late bloomers, also have really short primes.
Yep.
And so there's a concern from my end about how long they're going to, like, 4-year deal. The first year, you couldn't have asked for anything more.
Yep.
From Devon Toews. So as long as he could continue it, you're not even asking for better next year. Just do it again.
Yeah, like I said, I'd take 90% as good.
So, and this isn't. I wanted to focus a lot on the defense because there's a lot of talk about it. It was definitely a sore spot in that series, but I definitely think that this is a team on the right track.
Yep.
So,
I don't. The thing is, like, yes, there are, again, the defense had glaring issues, but the only reason those glaring issues popped up is because the Avs couldn't finish. Someone said it earlier in chat, the Avs led in 5 of these games and had plenty of opportunities to bury Vegas, but they just couldn't get that next goal.
Lost 2 games in which they had third period leads.
Yep.
When you lose a series 4-2,
it's an even series if you
just flip them.
Those games, or if you win them.
Colorado wins game 3 and they win game 5, and you're done.
Yep.
Series is over.
Yep. But they didn't. We can talk a little bit more about that in a second. I do want to get to the super chat really quick from Jacob. He says, "Are we doomed to hear Seth Jones rumors because of the Joe Sakic connection?"
What Joe Sakic connection?
Yeah, I don't know that connection.
Is it like the Joe Sakic Popeye Jones connection? The same reason that the Avs were going to draft him? Just want to make sure. I'm just wanting to make sure I'm on the same
question accurately.
Yeah, I'm on the same page there.
Regardless, I don't think the Avs are trading for Seth Jones.
No. Look, dude, you can't also be like, the Avs need to go out and get somebody better on defense and then have a guy who is coming off of
this year.
Season.
Yeah.
And then pay the price that will cost to trade for him and then sign him.
Yeah. Yes, Papa.
That would be,
says Jacob.
That would be significant.
Yeah.
So I'm not
even
we'll just say no thank you.
Yeah.
I will say that the Dougie Hamilton news today was way more interesting for me.
Oh boy, here we go.
One, Nemeth isn't the only big D man for comparison, but he's the archetype. There are 3 Patrick Nemeths, like, on average on every defense.
Yeah. I'd look at the 2 D men that are on the bigger side on the Avs D-core, Nemeth and Graves.
Yeah.
They took
the same guy.
They took the most shit of anyone on the Avs D-core in this series.
Yeah.
So,
and like Eric Johnson was drafted first overall for a reason.
Yep.
Like, because a guy that's 6'6" and can skate like that and can move pucks is like a unicorn. Like, you just don't see those cats. So that's why I'm saying, like, that's the archetype.
Yep.
So, like, I mean, you watch some of the guys from Vegas. Like, I love Zach Whitecloud, but you get to the end of the series.
There's a skill cap there for Whitecloud.
You get to the end of the series. P.S. You want a bigger physical D-man? Look at the three guys who produced the worst on ice results for Vegas.
Yep.
Alec Martinez, Nick Holden, and Braden McNabb.
Interesting.
You know, Nick Hague was effective, but limited minutes, which you could make the same argument for Braden McNabb. Only about 50 to 40 minutes or so.
Chat, I know I've seen chat talking a lot about, one, if EJ's healthy, two, if Kadri isn't suspended. This season, those are cop-outs. You had a mostly healthy team. You weren't missing any of your star players.
Yeah.
The Avalanche had a grade A shot as it was. All they had to do was win 1 of 4 games in a row, and they get Kadri back for game 7.
All they had to do was close 2 third-period leads that they built, that they earned, that they got.
There's no excuse of missing EJ or Kadri or pick one of the fourth liners that was out. That's not a big enough problem. They just needed to play better. You saw the convergence in game 6, right? Grubauer, games 1 through 3 played very, very well. Games 1 through 4-ish, whatever. Grubauer was playing well when the Avs weren't getting production. Then the Avs start getting production, and all of a sudden Grubauer can't make a save. Things just didn't quite line up for the Avs.
Yeah, and look, it's a huge reason why it's really hard to win a Stanley Cup.
Yep.
Because everybody has to be pulling on the rope the same direction at the same time. You got to get a little bit lucky along the way. The Avs got just unlucky enough and then ran into poor play from key players.
Yep.
And look, to be honest with you, missing Nazem Kadri hurt. JT Compher filled in ably for him.
He was fine, but it wasn't. The second line wasn't the threat that it could have been.
Exactly. Like, you take William Karlsson out of that series, how different is it?
Yep.
It's a huge difference. That guy was going to make a difference. We're talking about EJ a lot because EJ is under contract. He's very likely not going anywhere. And as long as he's healthy, he'll play next year.
Yep.
And if he's not, then he'll sit and we'll be in this position again of talking about what the team looked like without him. You just never know. Now, you're not banking on him being healthy, of course, but he's on track to be healthy at the start of next season. So we're going to talk about it. If he's around, then great.
Yeah. The reality of those situations is, especially with EJ, the expectations are that he's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Look, if
we've been
things start happening, they start happening. But yeah,
we've been talking for 2 months now about him waiving his NMC and it not being a concern.
Yep,
it will be fine.
Look,
he's not going to be a part of. The only way he ends up a factor in the expansion draft is if Colorado is like, you can get rid of the $6 million.
Look, this conversation keeps coming back to the same thing people are talking about. Was Byram not playing a factor? Look, yes, guys like Kadri, EJ Byram, they could have been a factor. We'll never know because they didn't play in the series exactly how it would have shaped up. But at the end of the day, are you not just moving pawns around? Because none of these guys are Nathan MacKinnon. None of these guys are your top line, are your best players. They're your secondary guys. And at the end of the day, your best players are the ones who failed to get it done critically in games 3, 4, and 5.
Mm-hmm.
So you can move the pawns around all you want, but it's the queens, the rooks, the knights, the bishops that do the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
So MacKinnon played great in game 6, but like I said, when the top line finally showed up, Grubauer disappeared.
Yeah.
They didn't line up for them. We do have to take our second period break, though, as we are brought to you by Hassel Cattle Company. Bringing you damn good beef. You can get their Wagyu beef burgers down at the DNVR bar if you want to try them. They are delicious. Highly recommend. And you can order at hasslecattlecompany.com. Get 10% off and use code DNVR10 for all of their meats. If you want to do a group order, $200 gets you free shipping as well. So they can cover all the types of meat you're looking for, whether it be the Wagyu, whether it be sirloins, whether it be in ribeye, in bone-in words. Yeah, they have great meat. Really, though, I really do love their stuff.
I'm a big fan of words.
I like Hassel Cattle Company beef better than words, to be honest with you.
Delicious.
Also, Strava Craft Coffee, the CBD infused coffee. They've been with us for a long time. Another product you can get at the DNVR Bar Cold Brew. When you order online for the first time, you can get 25% off with DNVR25. And when you sign up for their subscription service, you get 20% off for life. If coffee's not your thing, you can head over to Solace Meds. That's SOLACE meds.com. And you can get 20% off on a bunch of select products there. Use code DNVR20 at checkout to get 20% off. They have other great deals in store as well. You can get your stuff online and go to one of their 4 locations here in Colorado for pickup. Get in, get out, super quick, super easy, get you what you need. They're awesome, just like all of our other sponsors. Can't recommend these people enough. They do great work and they hook up all y'all. Again, use the DNVR20 code to get what you need. All right. Third period of the DNVR Avalanche podcast presented by DraftKings Sportsbook. What is the solution? Because I think I know what we are going to say about the McKinnons and McCarrs of the world, and to a certain extent it just boils down to them playing better. But I think for a lot of the fan base that's not a good enough answer.
They have to get over that.
Fair enough.
The same way Tampa Bay's fans had to get over when they got swept after winning the President's Trophy.
Yep.
And having like a 126-point season or whatever. Like, that was a nightmare. They made no major changes. They didn't fire their head coach. They didn't do anything. They just sat there and said, you know what? We believe in our talent.
And they worked.
And it's gone pretty well for them so far. Right now, that's what Colorado needs to do. They need to believe in their talent.
A surprisingly optimistic viewpoint from this podcast.
So, I mean, they're there, man. Like, you don't win a President's Trophy because you fluked into it.
Yeah,
they're there. Like, they've got the goods. Now they have a tough offseason ahead of them. They have some really hard decisions to make. They've got some really tough conversations that they have to have. They've got to manage a difficult offseason well. This is not going to be like the last 2 off seasons where they have just enough cap space that they can go and just start buying up players. They can go and look at, okay, we are going to take it to, they took advantage of cap strap teams in Toronto, Washington, and the Islanders.
Yep.
Now they're the cap strap team. So they're either going to have to get real creative. Joe Sakic's going to have to really like master hypnotism via phone. Or they're just going to have a very different look in this offseason.
Well, and the thing is, I think what lessens the load of some of those decisions this year is you have an Alex Newhook that looks pretty darn ready for the NHL.
Yeah.
You have a guy like Martin Kaut waiting in the wings. And all of a sudden, the decisions on guys like a Matt Calvert, like a Pierre-Edouard Bellemare, the stuff at the bottom of the lineup doesn't hold quite as much weight to it. So that part of it gets easier. With that being said, Brandon Saad, arguably the Avs MVP of the playoffs.
His offseason is going to be fascinating because he kind of controls his destiny. Does he want a really, really easy life and go to Edmonton where they will surely overpay him? Does he want to go be part of a rebuilding where they will surely overpay him in LA? Or does he want to stay here and compete for something? And he'll have to take a little bit less money. He's not I would really just looking at the market, looking at how much money teams are going to have, looking at the quality of players. I just can't imagine a world in which Brandon Saad gets $6 million again.
But I mean, every time the conversation comes up, it's well, now the flat cap might be 4 years. Now it might be 5 years.
Yeah.
So it's definitely going to be hard for those type of players to really get big money.
I will say, I think that it helps Saad's case for taking less money. The fact that he's been making $6 million for the last 4 or 5 years.
Yep.
Because now he won't be quite as motivated. Like, you look at a guy like Devon Taves, he got traded last year. He had to cash in.
This is his one real opportunity to make big money. Yeah.
He had to cash in.
Yep.
And that is probably the biggest. The $16 million or so will probably be the big contract of Devon Taves' career.
31 at the end of that deal. And
Brandon Saad has already made like $35 million or something in his career.
Yep.
He's already
not exactly strapped for cash. Yeah.
He's already made real good money. He's gonna make real good money on whatever contract he gets this offseason, but he can approach it with different priorities than a guy like Devon Taves last year. Now, Taves was an RFA, so he didn't have the luxury of leveraging an entire league against each other.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be a really interesting situation for him, because in Colorado, he can look at it and say, I loved this run. I loved being in the city. I loved being part of it. Players tend to stay here.
Yep.
When you talk about life stuff, players like being here.
To George's point, who asks, is it really that big of a deal? I think my question would be, where is the line that you draw? Do you move heaven and earth to bring someone like Saad back? Like, if it comes down to it and he wants money, do you consider moving out? Without getting into too much of the details, because we don't know who gets taken in expansion, but would you, let's say Donskoy gets taken, would you also move like a JT Compher out actively for less money to make room for Saad?
If you could, yeah, sure. Of course. But he really, between the Tyler Toffoli deal last year, I think that's the low bar.
Yeah.
If Colorado could do that, I think that they would have to. It would.
How do you say no to that kind of?
Yeah. Exactly. Like, how do you not find room for that guy?
Yeah.
For that deal. Now, the other contracts that we haven't talked as much about, it's always the big three.
Yeah.
But they have new contracts for Connor Timmins and Tyson Jost. Timmins, I fully suspect, is a qualifying offer deal.
That's a QO.
I fully expect that's a QO, but I want to bring it up and just leave it open. That's the kind of contract where you could steal value if you really wanted to.
You see something you like, you give him like a 3-year 1.5 or something. Yeah,
exactly. Where you overpay him just a touch right now, but by years 2 and 3, you're like about it because it's nothing.
Yep.
Like, you look around the league and a guy like Dylan DeMello making $3 million. Patrick Nemeth is coming off of a $3 million deal. Like,
and you have Connor Timmins at 1.5.
Yeah, exactly. So I only bring it up because I want to say that is exactly the kind of contract that you can steal value on if you want to get aggressive with the term on that one.
For sure.
Because young players typically like safety. They especially guys who are not star caliber players who are in line for a massive payday.
Do you not have a similar-ish conversation with Tyson Jost, given, like, if you believe in his second half of the season that he had?
This is the other one that I wanted to get to, is that Tyson Jost has a really maybe the most interesting contract negotiation of Colorado's offseason.
Yep.
What do you do with it? Because first half of the season, I believe I went and looked this up. I could probably actually pull this up pretty quickly.
But notes here somewhere, yeah.
I believe it was the last 26 games of the regular season. He was a 0.5 per game player.
I was something like 13 points in 26 games or 15 points in like 30 games or something. But yeah, the production started to come online in the second half of the season for Tyson Jost. There's no doubt about that one. And that the question that the Avs have to answer
14 and 28.
There you go. So right in between. But that is a middle six NHL player if you can produce like that consistently.
Well, and then you consider that he produced 4 points in the postseason.
4 points? Was it that much? Yeah, I guess because he came in at the end too. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so he had 4 points. He had 4 points in the postseason,
and despite his getting shelled in the numbers in the Vegas series,
so 4 points in 10 games in the playoffs, like not amazing, but
that's fine for a
solid
third line player. Yeah,
and consider that he spent the entirety of the 6-game Vegas series playing up.
Yep,
that he was
above his head a little bit for
exactly.
Sure. Yeah.
He was drowning in his matchup because he was playing
somewhere he shouldn't be. Yeah,
yeah. So you keep that in mind, but you also have to recognize that the first part of the season did exist. 3 points in 26 games. You have to be really careful with whatever contract it is. Because you can't do that shit.
You're talking about being on the verge of getting benched at that level of production.
Yeah. I mean, we were like, and it wasn't just him. You remember that Colorado's entire bottom six
was just doing nothing.
A glacial start to the season.
Belmar had 3 points for like 20 games, and they were all empty netters. So
yeah, Belmar was no offense for about 30 games.
Yep.
JT Compher, same thing.
Yep.
Matt Calvert had the injury issues, so he never really got into a rhythm, but he didn't score a goal this year. And Tyson Jost was the same thing. So it was all of Colorado's bottom six, except Jonas Donskoy, who was shooting 25% for 2 months.
And then in the second half of the season, forgot how to score.
Yeah. So, yeah. It was interesting. But with Jost, you have to really wonder, like, which one is the real one. He averaged 1344 of ice time in that 26 games where he scored 3 points.
Yeah. And in the second half, likely averaged a bit more than that by the end of it. But
it was at 1429 for the second half of the regular season.
That's only a minute more. That's not that
right. But that's a minute is a real, like, that's a real jump because he was, yeah. And then in the postseason, 1541.
Yeah, where he's playing above his head again. But
yeah,
yeah, and I mean, if you're the Avs side, right, you probably try and split the difference, and you say, all right, we're not going to pay you like a 40 point per game player or a 40 point player in an 82 game season, but we're also not going to play you like a 15 point player.
Right. We're not going to give you another qualifying offer.
Right. You land somewhere in the middle.
Can you give him the deal that they gave Nichushkin?
That feels a touch expensive.
Agreed. But I wanted to ask the question.
Yeah. I mean, the deal you want to give him if you're Colorado is like Arvidsson, right?
Well,
I know that's not realistic, but
I think the deal. I think the deal that you want to give him is more like, what was it, Yarnbrook?
That one was like 4 or 5 years, right? Just like nonsense.
It was 6 years at $2 million.
6 years, yeah, you'd do that in a heartbeat. Like, what is that contract?
6 years at $2 million per.
Just wants to sign for 6 years at $2 million per. You do that. That's
for a career high of 35 points.
Oh my god. Yeah.
Although, wow, Yarncrook, he only scored more than 2 playoff points one time.
Well, that's why you get $2 million for the next 6 years, I guess.
Yeah. So, like, if you're going long term, like, that's obviously your dream. Like,
yeah.
That's a silly deal.
I mean, I think the number's correct though. Like,
$2 million.
You want this contract to come in somewhere around $2 million, hopefully a little under if you're the Avs, but you're hoping to get 2, maybe 3 years out of that, probably in reality.
Yeah, I think if you're giving him the jump to $2 million, you have to ask for 3 years.
The third year, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I'd be okay with that, yeah.
And then they're going to say, oh, well, how about 1 year at $3 million? And then you're just like,
no.
What are we doing here?
Yep. Yep.
So I think, I think $2 million is right in the neighborhood of where I would be comfortable with.
Yep. I think that's pretty accurate.
I actually do think JT Miller would be a target for Colorado, but they're not moving Sam Girard. It would be stupid to move Sam Girard.
Yeah, the wrong piece to move there.
Yeah. Also, you're gonna bring in JT Miller and you're gonna keep Nazem Kadri.
Tough sell there.
I don't know. I just don't know why.
Yeah, I mean, Kadri especially, he's going to be at his best playing at center. You have Newhook, who's been solid. It would be hard to.
I liked Newhook a lot.
I did too. Like, I think he should be an NHLer next year, like full time. Granted,
do we think that that's going to happen?
Do I think it's going to happen? Ask again when we see him at camp.
Really? Because I think it is. I don't know what kind of role they envision for him, but I think that it was pretty telling that they brought him along as quickly as they did. Like, they were like, okay, let's see how he does in the AHL. And he was like, LOL, I pooped on that league. And then, got to the NHL, and it was like you could see the difference between Newhook and Ranta. Ranta was lost.
Yeah.
It was way too much for him.
I mean,
but Newhook didn't have that. Newhook had one game where you were like, this has really gone poorly for him. But he makes 2 high skill plays that result in goals for depth lines for them. And I think that I think Newhook's got to be. I think he's got to be planned for.
I think he probably has the inside line now. I'm not going to guarantee anything because, again, we don't know what happens in the offseason.
Yeah.
For all we know, the Avs could go out and get centers.
I don't want him on the 4th line, though.
It doesn't make a ton of sense to keep him on the 4th line. It's such an easy slot in on the 3rd line for him next year.
Yeah. I mean, Nichushkin, Jost, and Newhook.
Yeah. Run it. Just let that line forecheck people to death.
Yeah.
But
it would be an interesting. I think the real. I mean, we're talking all these different guys, and go and get this guy, and go and get that guy. But I think Colorado has some choices to make because next year you have real conversations. You've got Logan O'Connor.
Yep. You
want Logan O'Connor to be a regular.
Yep.
Newhook burned a year the second he signed his contract.
Yep.
It didn't matter how many games he played.
He
could have sat around the rest of the season smoking, and he would have burned that the first year of his contract.
But it's way deeper than Logan O'Connor, right? You now have to have a serious conversation about when is Martin Kaut, if ever, going to be a regular NHLer.
Yeah, this is what I'm getting to.
Bowers, yeah.
It's not just it's you have real conversations about Alex Newhook, Shane Bowers, Martin Kaut, Sampo Ranta, Logan O'Connor. Am I missing anybody?
Probably. I mean, those are the most immediate
Bowers,
ones.
Ranta, Newhook, and O'Connor. Those 5 guys. Like those 5 guys. That's 5 guys. That's
Yep.
Your entire bottom 6.
I mean, chat will already know, like, for us, this is an easy conversation to just get rid of the Jason Megnas of the world. But we are very pro young prospects on this podcast.
So that's like, what their plans are for those guys, I think is really important too, because like Sampo, I don't think you have to. I think he showed he could really use some AHL time.
That one, I barely even count him in that list. There's a significant gap of the Newhook, Kaut, Bowers, and then you kind of have Ranta.
Well, and your conversations with Kaut and Bowers are mostly just, if not now, when.
Correct. Especially with the Kaut, I don't. If he's not going to play next year, I don't. How do you ever get him into the lineup?
Yeah, it's like what's going on here? Because I think O'Connor has an easy line. He should be an easy slot in next year.
At absolute worst, that dude's a 13th forward for you.
At absolute, agreed, totally. Because we saw, it's funny because when he came back at the end of the year, we saw both the good and bad.
Yep.
His first game, you saw what you really liked out of him: speed, physicality, kind of falls his way into scoring chances, even though he can't finish.
Yeah.
And then the second game, you're just like, well, he's not doing anything. He's playing like shit. And you're like, okay, this is why he's a fourth line player.
Yep.
So with O'Connor, I think you're good there. To be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if Kiefer Sherwood got involved in that bottom six mix. But I don't really want to continue to get into this part of the conversation.
Save that for the middle of the offseason for sure.
Yeah, I just think that when we're talking about what went wrong, a lot of this is like cut some of this dead weight. Belmar gone, Soderberg gone. Turn it over. You know, you're losing somebody in expansion.
Yep.
Until you know who that is, it has a pretty big impact on what your plan is.
Depending on if it's a forward or a D, especially, yeah.
Because if you lose Graves, you're just like, oh, Bowen Byram, come on down.
Yeah, right. The Graves conversation is an easy one.
And maybe it has a minor effect on the Justin Barron timeline.
Sure.
Because it's just one less body in his way.
I think it probably quicker tunes up to go get a Jamie Alexiak or something like that.
Yeah.
But in any case, yeah.
I would agree.
However, if they lose a forward, that's where the conversation gets more interesting because you have...
That's where those five guys roll in.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're like, you lose Donskoy. Now, if you lose Comfer, you're like, okay, given what he gave the Avs this year, this shouldn't be too difficult for them to replace.
Yep.
If it's Donskoy, like you're like, okay, we need 30 points somewhere.
That dude actually produced, yeah.
Yeah. You need to get 30 points somewhere. Annunen is in the AHL. So he's got to do something first in the AHL.
The dude has played essentially zero professional hockey in North America. So
yeah,
if you want to be hyped on him, be hyped. But
I'm not about to tell anybody not to be excited for him. He came over and played 3 games for the Eagles where he was okay.
Yeah.
But it was at the end of a really long year, a weird year. He didn't play very much all season. His first 3 North American games. That's a big adjustment for goaltenders.
If Annunen plays in the NHL next year, the Avs are either in deep trouble in the goaltender position, or he is running away with the AHL Goalie of the Year award.
Or they did something really stupid again.
Also an option, yes.
Because right now, I think at goaltender, the big conversation is how much damage did Philip Grubauer do to his own market with a poor finish to the Vegas series?
Yep.
The big question has always been, can you win big with Philip Grubauer in net? And look, he's always been good.
Yeah, if you look at his
playoff numbers,
they're fine.
like he's always been good, but he's not been great. And this was his chance to be great. They needed him to get out of that series. They needed more from him, just flat out.
They didn't even need that much more.
Nope.
If he steals one of those games, the Avs look great. Yeah.
For me, it's game 5. Because if you look at the numbers in game 5, I will just one stat I will throw at people, okay? Game 5, a game in which they lost 3-2.
Yeah.
Game 5, Colorado at 5v5. 12 high danger chances, 0 high danger goals. Vegas, 6 high danger chances, 2 high danger goals.
Yeah.
That's it. That right there. That's the difference between losing the series in 6 and getting at least a 7.
I think it's game 3 for me, man. I know the Avs played like garbage that night, but you have a lead with 5 minutes and 30 seconds left, and you get one big save.
Those goals, though, the goal,
I
the
know.
Marchessault off the back, and then the tip. I think those were both just great plays by those players.
I hear you, but
Game 5 bothered me.
the greatest goalies in the world find a way to do something spectacular.
Well, and like, what are we talking about here? We're splitting hairs between which game do we need him to make the big save.
Right. Pick one. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter which one of us is right. If you get one of them.
Yep.
If you get one of them.
It's a completely new world, yeah.
You at least go 7.
Yep.
If you get them both, you win in 5.
Over, yeah.
So it was just too much. No, you don't bring Devin Dubnyk back. You still have Pablo Francouz.
Yeah.
You still have $2 million committed to that guy.
Francouz is the backup / whatever, 1B, if you want to call it that, depending on how things shake out next year, is the easiest decision the Avs maybe have to make this offseason.
Andrew Kopp is an RFA, so no. Otherwise, I'd be all about it. He's great.
I mean, yeah, they're gonna queue him, so whatever.
Yeah, I mean, he's an RFA. Like they have no shot at him.
Yep. Anyway, I think we're wrapping up for the day. Obviously, we'll cover a lot of the topics we touched on in more in depth as we get closer to free agency and trade potential, all of that stuff. It's going to be a fun time. Yeah, I'm excited for expansion draft stuff to start ramping up, because if there's something we get asked about more than anything, it's expansion draft stuff. And now it's finally time where like there's actually going to be news and information about it.
I'm legitimately shocked.
Yeah.
How many questions, how often we've talked about expansion this year, and we've talked about the rules and how many questions we get about basic like process stuff.
Yep.
So to me that just says we just have to keep talking about it. We have to get into it.
Yep.
Look, expansion happens like a couple times
regularly every decade. Yeah.
Yeah, like every decade, every other decade.
Like from 2001 to 2018, 17, is that when Vegas entered? Was like the longest time they'd gone without expanding.
And after this, you're like, okay, there's 32 teams. They're tied with the NFL. They have more than the NBA and more than MLB.
But even then, people like Houston are knocking down the door for more teams.
Well, and you have other cities that people want to get into. You look at Portland. You look at Kansas City. You look at Houston.
Yep.
There are cities that they want to get into.
The back pocket, Quebec, as always.
Quebec. You look at Hamilton.
Hamilton is, I think, secretly a tough sell because the Leafs would be mad. But
I'm just acknowledging
all right,
Canadian
AJ,
markets.
What about Wood Buffalo? All right.
What?
Don't worry about it.
Okay.
The 3 people who were on hockey Reddit in 2016 will know.
Great. Big market there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The population of 12 in Wood Buffalo is really selling it.
Yeah. So I'm like, expansion is exciting. It's fun. And they set it up so that the expansion team should be competitive. And obviously we saw lightning in a bottle with Vegas. I don't think we'll get there with Seattle.
I'd be shocked if that happened again.
I do think Seattle has a good chance to compete for the postseason because their division is going to be horrible.
Yeah.
It's going to be horrible.
Yeah, but at very least they won't be just a free win for everybody. So it's going to be a fun time. Can't wait to dig into it a little bit more. But for today, we're out of here. Thank you for watching, listening, however you consume the podcast. We appreciate all of y'all so very much. We will be back tomorrow. Obviously I've been out of the loop a little bit, so we're playing things a little bit by ear at the moment, but I'm sure we have tons of awesome content coming your way.
Yeah, we should be fine Monday through Friday. It's really just
which topics do we want to pick and choose at this point?
Yeah. Where to start,
Yep. So glad y'all hung out with us. Hope to see you tomorrow. Until then, we will talk to you all later.